order. Brandy, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Dolly.
Here.
Oletsky.
Present.
Hanson.
Here.
Dargits Johnson.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Case.
Here.
And Brink and Spire are absent. We have a quorum. Who else am I missing? Brink. I think we're good.
Bill was here. I don't know where he is now. But.
He left. He's an alternate.
Number 3 on the agenda is invitation for public comment, participants submittal. If you have anything that you want to add to this meeting that is not on the regularly scheduled agenda, there is a time for that towards the end of the agenda. Please let Brandy know. Thank you. Number 4 is approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dargits Johnson, second by Kays. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Number 5 is approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or amendments to the minutes, or can I get a motion?
I think it says that Blake Dolly presided, but I think it was you, Todd.
We will make that adjustment. Good catch, Diana. How could we forget? I'm just kidding. I'm just.
Any other changes to the last week's meeting? I was not present, so I don't think it's appropriate that I comment on them. Does anybody have anything else to add or change? Can we get a motion for the amended meeting minutes from May 25th?
I'd make a motion to approve the amended minutes.
We have motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Number 6 is the regular agenda. On the regular agenda, we have a commission resolution for the consideration of resolution number 2023-16, approving the plat of plat of West Watertown Facilities, first addition to the municipality of Watertown in the county of Cottington, South Dakota. Brandy, would you please tell us what we're looking at today?
Yes, thank you, Liam. So this is the plat proposal for the West Watertown Facilities First Edition. And if you recall, at the last meeting, we had looked at rezoning this property, or brought it forward for rezoning it from I-1, and you can see that's the lot 2 and 3 on this plat, from that property being rezoned from I-1 to C3. So then now, in conjunction with this rezone as well as these legal descriptions were referenced, we are bringing forward this plat, which will subdivide the property, the city-owned property, into 3 conforming lots. And that is, regardless if it's zoned I-1 or C3, they're still conforming. The right-of-way of 10th Avenue Northwest is being platted per this plat, dedicated per this plat more so. And I have attached the access permit from the DOT along with some other documentation from our master transportation plan, which when we get into it, Heath can probably expand more if you guys have questions on that. But we thought that we would include that just for reference and your information. Other than that, I think I'll stand by for any questions.
Okay, remember the last time we were here, Doc, the vet, he was there and he was talking about buying that triangle. Did he contact you, or did anybody talk about that with him? I seen him at a convenience store. He was asking about it. I said I didn't know.
So if he is interested, once this plat is recorded, he can approach the city on if he wants to purchase a portion. Mm-hmm. But where we're at in the process, we already had the plat created. Yeah. So okay. It's something that we can look at in the future.
Okay.
That would require an administrative plat if that was to move forward, because it's just a subdivision of a previously approved plat?
Yes.
This is Ford. I'm curious about the resolution with Arrow Truck Line and their access to the highway. How was that resolved?
So we decided that 9th Avenue was not needed for this plat because all of the lots that are previously recorded have access. So 9th Avenue will not be dedicated as right-of-way and a street will not be constructed.
And as, I guess, additional note, they were more concerned with access to a pasture that is, I'm gonna say, west of lot number 2.
Yeah.
So
And
their main business will access Highway 20 more across from the zoo for, I guess, point of reference, where the pasture, I guess where you have your cursor, they'll have access on that,
10th.
yeah, that roundabout, if you will.
So they're satisfied.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So to the level of satisfaction, that has not been relayed to us by those owners. One thing that I did speak with the owner about right after the last planning commission meeting was the extension of 10th Avenue. It was not defined at the time of the rezone on how far 10th would be extended. And when I described to him what this plat would likely look like, which is as it's presented today, where 10th does extend all the way to that property, his response to that was, oh, well, we can just access our property off 10th then. Yep, problem solved. So I think that that takes away the concern of the whatever handshake agreement that they had and cutting through our property to get to their other property. And then also, I still want to point out, because it is a matter of fact here, that they do still have frontage with that piece of land onto Highway 20. So even without 10th Avenue, this plat would not be landlocking them. They do still have access or connectivity to Highway 20 as well.
Do we know if, not to muddy the waters, but do we know whether or not access has been purchased by the DOT, that they retain full access and they don't necessarily have to provide access to a property? And because I know lots of times DOT will go out and they'll purchase all access rights to, and if as long as we're not dealing with the inverse condemnation, I don't think it's an issue. But I just wanted to, did anybody reach out to DOT whether or not there was access at that point on Highway 20?
No, we have not, mainly because we're providing it through 10th Avenue.
Yeah, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
I've got a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Blake.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for Heath or Brandy there, I'm looking at the application that was included there as well, so the application to the DOT. And there's an older image there for the plat drawing, so that does not show the 10th Avenue extending all the way through as presented for the plan today. But there's also a aerial view in there that shows some accesses to be eliminated. Are those still all being eliminated? 4 different accesses?
Yeah, they
On the
are. And
20?
let me
Okay.
pull those up and I'll share that to teams and kind of walk through those details if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Oh my gosh, dude, I'm not sharing.
Please.
So with that, Heath, is that, right along with that, then how about the speed limit? Is that going to be pushed out further from city limits?
We have not had any definitive discussions with the DOT about that. I talked very briefly with one of the DOT reps, and they reminded me how far back that transition actually occurs, which was further than I thought that it did. So I think that their initial first glance of that is they think that it's pretty adequate the way it's set up now. It might just be more of an enforcement issue. Make sure people are dropping to that appropriate speed as they're coming in from the northwest. But definitely a discussion we could continue to have with the DOT, that if we feel that the space, the location of that speed reduction is appropriate for this 10th Avenue extension.
I would agree with Heath. I think the other part of that is, whatever, kind of growing up being native of Watertown, is I think as far as the speed reduction coming into town, but I think also people picking up speed leaving town is by the time they hit 10th Avenue, most of those people are already doing 40, 45, which should be a 30 or a 35 mile an hour zone.
Of equal concern both directions,
Correct,
you're saying.
correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think it's, the problem I have personally when I drive it is it's built like a 65 mile an hour highway. Even when it's a 55 out by the airport, it's very well constructed. It's a lovely highway, but it's designed, it certainly feels like it's a much faster highway. So unless you're actively paying attention, it's pretty easy to exceed even 55. I should admit that maybe in a public hearing. But I drive that every morning when I come in because I live out kind of off of Highway 20. And I ever since this discussion sort of started, I've been paying very close attention to where I mentally or psychologically where I feel like I need to slow down because the speed is back over behind, I think, even Howard's turn in. I think it's even farther out towards like Doug's and stuff than that.
Yeah.
But like, I've noticed that the traffic flow certainly coming into that curve is pretty common for it to be 40, 45 coming into that curve.
And there are other, one last comment on the speed, there's other traffic control measures that we could talk to the DOT about. I don't want to, of course, promise any because it'd be up to them and their jurisdictional control whether we would implement them. But, you have your radar speed limit signs, for example. You've got flashing lights and warnings that you can call attention to the speed, more prominently than just a static speed limit sign does. So there's things like that too that we can always consider through this curvilinear alignment as people come in and go out of town on Highway 20, because it is built very robustly through there. So the level of comfort often drives the speed that people will go. That's where design speeds come from and speed studies. They often try to set the speeds according to the 85th percentile that all the cars are driving. And if we've got a nice wide open stretch of highway that are pushing the limits, a speed study could easily show that this would warrant maybe a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, not 35, which we don't want to go that direction. So keeping the enforcement, the proper signage, and all those things into account here, I think will be important. To go back to the Commissioner Dolly's questions on the access to be eliminated, there are 4 of them highlighted here. The DOT provided this map back to us in our access permit. There's an individual access up here just northwesterly of where 10th Street ties into Highway 20. There's one right across from that same point, and then another one further to the southeast. Those 3 would all come out and be, we'd essentially be responsible to put curb and gutter back in there. Those wouldn't be allowed to be used as individual accesses. And then there's one more down here near the cafe that one would be eliminated as well. So we would primarily have 10th Avenue, and then whether through 9th Avenue construction or the more likelihood of a private city street facility access, this one would remain in either way, whatever that ends up being. Like Brandy indicated, the initial plan was to include an extension of 9th here, but we've kind of backpedaled on that one and thought maybe just a private interest into our site. But that's all pending some of the final designs and layouts of the new street facility. But either way, this one would stand, this one would go away, and these 3 would go away. The point to make there in working with the DOT, they and city engineering staff acknowledged that the elimination of these individual accesses in the long run, as this land area would develop for commercial use, would be safer to eliminate those than to allow all those with 10th Avenue. So instead of all those individual ones, all that land area gets directed down to 10th Avenue, and you have one point of connectivity onto Highway 20 rather than 4 separate ones, is the logic there, which the city was not opposed to at all. We felt that made good sense.
Heath, from a design standpoint, we've got coming off of Highway 20, you've got that access that goes straight north on 10th Street or whatever name that street is there. I mean, would there be any reason to someday try to eliminate that and make it just a right in coming off of and widening it further up the curve? I mean, because I think that's part of the problems that when you look at that design, when you have that extra road coming in.
Not only when you look at the design, but when you drive it.
Yeah.
That is a huge issue when you drive that.
And
Unlike Liam, I drive it at the speed limit regularly. However, yeah. But yes, we were talking about safety a lot and all that. That's a touchy one.
And I know we have the county shop and we have a manufactured home court there, and there's other properties that get developed. And I don't think it's necessarily germane specifically to this plat today, but I think from a long-range planning standpoint, I still think it's a problematic multi-intersection on a curve, which, again, not being an engineer, I just know enough that all those access points on that much of a radius is problematic.
Yeah, Commissioner Case, to your point here, this is the one you're referring to, right? Where the northbound would
Yep.
continue north onto 10th Street. I've had the same thoughts on that as I've actually talked through it with fellow engineering staff. They reminded me of that this movement here is really one of the least traffic conflict movements that you would have. It's kind of like an off-ramp on an interstate. It's just a gradual, people are going to go there. It's not a hard stop to turn right like you would otherwise have up here. And so really the traffic conflict that this is creating is quite minimal compared to other intersections, like a T intersection where you're taking a hard right or left out of the because of that free right turn off ramp kind of movement that it is. Does it create another, oh heck, what's going on here? Absolutely, but it's not as much of a traffic hazard as what.
Would that be
it always-
exacerbated if there was a controlled intersection just, less than a couple hundred feet to the south of it, at some day, that if 10th Avenue was ever going to be a lighted intersection, would that maybe make it worse than it's not so bad today?
Again, because it's only impacting that northbound traffic,
Probably not so much.
yeah, you don't have any southbound influence from that segment right here.
There is, go ahead, Tom.
I was just saying, it's just more of I know it's more of a question I'd like to ask somebody who's more learned than I am, and just to get some input on. But it makes sense to me what you're saying.
So I have ridden my bike on that bike path there, and it is not, people there, just FYI, I know it doesn't really relate to this, but it, we're talking about it, so. People take that right, and they don't slow down often, and they do not stop for the bike path.
Sure.
So if you see where the bike path is, for me, that is a real issue of safety right there, to be thrown into the pot of other things to consider when you're looking at that. Because if you've ever ridden that, you have to be so careful.
Yeah.
People do not
And it-
slow down when they take
And
that
it's
turn.
running at a diagonal, so if you're walking or running
Yes.
or biking, you gotta really turn both directions. All of a sudden, boom, there's someone going 35 miles an hour at you.
Yeah,
And,
it's,
Yeah.
point well taken, not necessarily related to this plat,
No.
but point well taken in that maybe the signage either on the trail or on that roadway could be improved. I don't even know if we have a bike crossing sign there, to be honest, but that's something we can go look at. And maybe there's improvements that way to call attention to the fact there's a bike crossing there. And then also on the trail too, so that the users of the pathway recognize where they need to yield or stop or give
that would be helpful.
right away to the vehicles. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that might be something that could be solved relatively easy with just
Right.
visual cues.
More signage, yeah.
But even pulling onto Highway 20 off of when you want to turn into, where it curves around, and that second one, the one, if you want to go south, that one right there, that one is so hard to see around because of all of those trees and the highway, it's in the middle of the curve and down you go, and
I didn't mean to take us down this rabbit
Yeah.
hole, but it was just something that,
Forkle Road, Little Road. Any other questions, concerns as it relates specifically to the plat for staff? There is no public.
I have two more questions.
Go ahead,
quick.
Diane.
So, does the 10th Avenue extension, does that end in a cul-de-sac or a roundabout?
That would be a cul-de-sac configuration,
It's a cul-de-sac, not a roundabout.
correct?
All right. And I see on this plat, which is on page 88 of our thing, there are a couple of spots here that say corner not accepted. And I'm curious to know what there are some that say corner accepted and some that say corner not accepted. What does that mean? Do you see where?
Where at?
Okay, here's the
Page
plat,
8?
right here in the middle
Yep.
and down here on the bottom. It says corner not accepted. Do you see where I am?
Mhm, yeah, I'm seeing that. And,
I mean, it
Keith
sounds
knows
like
that.
it's uncertain.
I think it's referring to the pins, the survey pins.
Yeah. But why it's not accepted?
So does that mean we're uncertain what this plat is really going to be in those two spots?
No, because this plat, those are existing pins. So these are already set lot lines. So it might just be that that pin was like, it's buried too deep. Like maybe they weren't able to recover it with this, but the survey, I guess, does not impact the plat that we're doing today.
So we're definite on these lines because
Yeah.
it says corner not accepted. It's not a gray area there. It's
No.
a defined black and white area there.
Yep.
All right.
One last question to piggyback on the cul-de-sac on the end. But Aero Trucking would have the ability to access through the cul-de-sac, so what are we talking about? 30-foot swath down the middle of it. So it technically wouldn't be a curbed cul-de-sac, it would be,
A rollover. They could decide. when
It
they
would
decide.
look, it would look a lot like a residential cul-de-sac with driveways coming off of it, where you'd have an appropriate curb cut for the driveway for their property off the end of that, which pretty much ends up being straight off the end of the cul-de-sac bulb. Yeah.
Would that be large enough to access? I mean, they're gonna have sometimes a pickup and trailer, but at times they would have a semi and livestock trailer.
Yep, we would apply our our engineering design standards for maximum driveway widths, which I believe is 40 feet for commercial industrial areas. And they would get the maximum allowed per the design standards.
Yeah, and there's 33
If-
feet there
if-
that would be for the property, but that should be sufficient.
Yeah, if triggered.
And yeah, if they're driving on the street, hopefully they can fit their vehicle through 33 feet.
But Bonnie, would you turn your microphone on when you speak so that everyone can hear you? Just in case there's any, I know that there are some people that watch planning commissions religiously, and thank you out there in the ether for doing that and holding everyone accountable.
If I may, Chair,
Yes.
so again, my understanding is on the proposed plat, Lot 1 pretty much becomes the street department. They would be able to access, off what we're gonna say is 10th Avenue with the elimination of 9th. Will they also have access off 11th Street Northwest? Would that at any time need improvement? I mean, pretty much now it's a gravel, dirt, unimproved.
The secondary access would come off of the southeast corner of the property where that, what I spoke to earlier about the potential 9th Avenue extension would have been on Highway 20. That'd be our secondary point of access. As far as using 11th, it's possible that we could. It'd be preferred we didn't because that's an unimproved segment of right-of-way. That's not a built road section in there until you get a couple lots south coming off of Highway 212. But thought there that escaped me. Oh, so any future development of those lots, Lot C or Lot A, off that southwest corner of our property, that would trigger the building of 11th Street, then yes, that street extension could dead end or be terminated in a cul-de-sac fashion at our property line or anything of that nature.
are there multiple landowners of those C, A, and B, or is it all individually owned, do we know?
I believe that's in a trust.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you will get, Heath, you will get access at the corner, at the southeast corner down there? I guess
Yeah.
it'll be south, okay.
Yep. That existing curb cut will remain.
Thank you.
And also, if I can add, the fact that we're not, so 11th Street is already platted. So usually when you dedicate right-of-way, that's when you are required to install it. So that's why there's not that obligation with 11th, because it's already been dedicated. It should have been built previously, but then that's where it would be addressed at the time somebody would want a building permit for those adjacent lots.
And realistically, you're probably going to be looking at a replat of that area anyway, when you start looking at the way those lots are laid out and what the best use and intent will be. Somebody's going to purchase a larger area, and I would imagine, as opposed to those lots, and bypass the need to construct 11th Street.
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely potential for that.
Yeah.
So I have another question about the cul-de-sac. So the 10th Avenue extension will be paved, and the cul-de-sac, and then there'll be the driveway, we'll call it that, opening for Arrow Truck Line to access through the cul-de-sac. So when you come to that spot, what will it be on the other side of the cul-de-sac? Just a dirt or gravel or pavement, or what will be there?
Whatever their private improvements would be required for them to use that.
And so my other question is,
And Diane, go ahead.
But, how do you prevent unauthorized access? Will that fall on Arrow Truck Line too? I mean, can anybody drive there then, because it's like a driveway opening? They'll be responsible for that also?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be no different than any other access off of any of our public streets. Whether anybody wants to trespass and use that point of access to go onto that land or not, really no different than any other
All right,
driveway or access. Yep.
thank you.
And
It's
two,
quite-
if I was going to add, Diana, when you were still on that first thought of, as far as, so the driveway would exist like kind of as is right now. If they ever wanted to obtain a building permit, then that's where paved parking, loading, and access would be required. So then at the time that they would want a building permit is when they would have to improve it further. But today it could remain, they'll have their access point and then they can get onto their property.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question concerning 10th Avenue, how you're going to tie them together, because there's such a level difference and the road slopes down. How is the city going to address crossing the highway without a big hill, or what do you plan to do?
So the west extension would tie into the existing grade along Highway 20. So whatever that elevation is on the west side of Highway 20, that's not going to change. That grade will remain the same. It has to because of the curve. But because it is stop controlled on both directions on 10th, that transition up that super elevation in the curve shouldn't be an issue at all with traffic going east or west across that intersection. But it will be stop controlled, but we do have to tie into that same elevation that exists on Highway 20 as it does today. So there'll really be no modification to the highway grades at all.
Okay, because 10th Avenue, as you're coming into it from the east, going west, you stop, and then you go down, kind of, the
Yep.
grade down, and then it'll be even. Okay.
I assume, Heath, that you maybe sat there with your vehicle and looked to the left to see
A couple
traffic coming?
times. Couple
Okay.
times, twice maybe.
Okay, good. At least you did it more than once. With that being said, I mean, obviously you can see then if you're feeling comfortable with that. Would there be any reason to entertain that there only be a right turn only to get back out of there?
I think that the initial setup, again, the speed is a huge factor here. Given the low speed limit being 35, I think that the initial setup, the DOT is comfortable with it, and we're comfortable with it. Now, if we were to extend this roadway and we started to see a spike in crash occurrences, then absolutely, we'd have to start reassessing that to say, hey, what could we be doing better here?
Okay. But right now, you have nothing built on Lot 3, and you can look all day long. What happens when I put my building on Lot 3?
Yep, and those are the factors where the setback of that, how that does or doesn't impede the line of sight, the sight triangle that we'd want to have maintained there. All those factors have to be taken into account and ironed out. And once that building is set, based on meeting setbacks, and they get a building permit, that line of sight and that sight triangle would be a factor in that building permitting review process. And then also, given the gradualness of this curve, I'm guessing that the sight triangle is going to be met It just might not be the wide open view that you see there now, obviously, depending on exactly how that building gets set.
And if I could add to a non-engineer perspective, I guess, is the more enclosure there is, the more traffic calming it is. So the more development that happens along here may, and this is all hypothetical, but it may give you that sense of like you need to slow down because there's things, it's not wide open. You can't see all the way down.
Now, can I ask the taboo question? Do you have something going in Lot 3?
Yes, there's the land trade agreement that the council recently approved a couple meetings ago puts development onto Lot 3.
And 2?
Not 2, only 3.
Only 3.
Yeah,
And just so we're clear, the only access to Lot 3 is on 10th, right? I think
Correct.
that's already been said.
correct,
And same thing with Lot 2.
correct.
And so, and if Lot 2 is subdivided, then there's just going to be, I mean, is there going to be some sort of north-south private drive, or how does that work?
That would depend on who bought it and how they would want to develop it. But no access would go on to 20, it would still channel down to 10th.
And that's really a condition of our state access permit. By getting this access, that they're removing those, so it has to funnel that way.
Exactly. So all of Lot 2 as proposed on this plat and Lot 3 would solely have access onto Highway 20 via 10th Avenue.
Heath, do you want to describe to them at all about the statistics on the current condition?
I can if the chair would like me to entertain that.
Well, I mean, I guess I'd pose it to the commission. Do you guys want to do a walkthrough? I will, before we do any sort of walkthrough, I will say I appreciate the information. It's certainly very helpful. And it shows what the current condition of the 10th Avenue intersection is.
I'm fine without, but
Yeah, unless if somebody has some specific questions, I would probably just prefer to limit it to specific questions about what the information was provided.
I'll just ask this question with that, Heath. Let's just say we have a major accident, one a week, right after this goes up. Let's just hypothetical. At that point, is it city duty, state duty, or just whose responsibility would it be to say, ho, 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 we better put a controlled intersection in here? Is that something the state would step up, or would we go to the state and say, hey, we do need to slow people down more? Who would make that determination?
Both parties would definitely be involved in those discussions, and the DOT would ultimately make that decision because they have the jurisdictional control over Highway 20. We work with them frequently in other locations throughout town, on the other highway routes, making recommendations based on our local observations. Sometimes those gain traction quickly, and they see what we're describing as a concern, and they agree, and they act quickly to rectify the situation and make some improvements from a traffic safety standpoint. There's other times where the studies don't quite trigger the necessity for certain traffic control improvements, and they have to push pause a little while longer. So it's not. It's very common for us to frequently have those discussions, is what I'm trying to say, and it would be a collaborative effort to justify any improvements.
And we got pretty good representation on that DOT board at the state level as well. So, I mean, if there was something really coming up, I think we have people that can help.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, being that this isn't really a public hearing, I would so-called make a motion to get this on in front of us for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kays. Do we have got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Dolly. Further discussion? We had a lot of good questions. A lot of information was provided by staff. Really appreciate the extensive information provided. Obviously, this area has received a fair amount of contention for various reasons. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I just have one more comment. Thank you for providing all of this. In my gut, I still feel anxiety about that 10th Avenue extension like this, but you've certainly provided plenty of documents. I personally feel it's a situation where the studies don't always reflect the actual situation. If you drive that road, it's oftentimes, sometimes different than what the studies. So let's hope the studies are right.
Absolutely, and you're welcome for the information. It's why we're here, so, and feel free to ask questions anytime you feel that maybe the information isn't adequate. We're glad to answer them too.
Yes, and I didn't, and I know that I maybe incited a little bit of hullabaloo the last time I wrote an email. Nobody, the public doesn't know about that, but I wrote an email regarding the rezone and my concerns with it. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the agenda early enough to really do a lot of due diligence. And again, I'm not trying to throw anything on you, Brandy, or anything, but we're trying to work with the time constraints we have. I understand that staff has got time constraints, and we've got time constraints too. Before we move on, I did want to ask a few questions and vote. I wanted to ask a few questions myself and address a few concerns. Is this, before we vote on it, is this the best option that we have? I mean, do you feel confident, city staff, that this is the very best option that we have in terms of access for all the lots?
Yeah, we are confident in this plan.
What other alternatives were considered in terms of access, specifically 10th Avenue versus 9th Avenue type access, before we arrived at this particular plat?
You could have entertained individual accesses like exist out there now onto Highway 20, which again, I think we would all recognize why that would not be a safer option when you have all the more points of conflict along the highway route due to a number of individual accesses. But that was one possibility that could have been retained as it exists today. And in that case, whether if 10th would not have been extended, still the desire to have a northerly access point into our street facility would have had to have been accomplished by a private driveway in lieu of 10th.
Still on 20?
Correct.
So you're talking, either somewhere on lot 2 or on lot 1 then?
Lot 1. It'd be on the northeast corner of Lot 1. Essentially where 10th is where we would have.
The summary being is that there's going to be an access there one way or the other?
Correct. And so when giving all those things and a culminating stance on it, everything kept coming back to 10th. We can eliminate all these individual accesses. We can safely channel all this internal traffic that's generated in the coming developments and put them out into one point of contact with Highway 20 rather than 4 to 6 to 7 points all along this route.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I just want to make just a few comments. Again, I very much appreciate everything that the city staff does. You guys are subject matter experts. We rely on you. Heath, you're a subject matter expert. Brandy, you're a subject matter expert. You guys do a fantastic job. I view you guys as colleagues and frankly friends. And so I do appreciate it when I see the level of due diligence and effort that goes into this. Obviously, it's a frustrating one, sort of. Again, I am not an engineer. I don't have that background, but I do know commercial trucking. I know car wrecks. I live in that world all day, every day. It certainly has that gut feel that Diana and I think maybe Rhonda expressed, that it looks like sort of a bad intersection. The question is it the least worst option or the best option? And I think I fully had intended today to vote against this plat, but I think that based on the discussion we've had today, it seems like it's the least worst option that we have. I would urge the city to consider all alternatives. For instance, left turns, particularly with commercial vehicles or truck-sized vehicles, even straight trucks, are extraordinarily dangerous. As common sense might tell you, it takes a lot longer to make a left turn in a commercial vehicle than a truck, especially if it's loaded. That means that that vehicle is in the lane of travel, the opposing lane of travel, for much longer than a regular passenger vehicle. So I would entertain or urge the city, obviously this is outside the purview of the Planning Commission, but this is the chance that we have to talk about it, to consider something like a no left turn policy out of that, at least as it relates to the city trucks. I've been involved in litigation with cities and municipalities, townships relating to intersections. What I think are unsafe designs or issues with stop signs, that kind of stuff. And this is just based on my experienced in my life, in my work life. So I would urge you guys to consider something to try to minimize that, and I sincerely hope that there isn't an issue. Certainly, the facts would indicate that this is probably the least worst option. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments, questions?
I would follow that up, Liam, with it. Is there any chance, I mean, and maybe traffic wouldn't warrant it, but a four-way stop, and I know everybody hates four-way stops. However, that would slow that traffic down coming in and leaving town. Because I'm just as guilty as everybody. You get around that curve and like I said, you just want to go. Because the road makes you feel that way. And so I'm looking for that 30, when's it switch, because I'm ready to go. So maybe a four-way. Even if it's only temporary, when that first opens up, just to get people slowed down. Because we're not
Well, I think a
used to it.
control that we do have, that we have control over. So as Heath said, the DOT is really governing jurisdiction over that, right? But we do have control locally at the enforcement level. So, if we can get our police department to actually enforce the speed limits at that intersection, that would do a heck of a lot to slow down the traffic that we all know speeds through there.
Yeah,
Right, right.
Heath had a great idea with a sign that, just something like that flashes red and light or whatever, or flashes when you're going too fast, because that brings attention pretty quickly. The reality is, the state controls whether or not that intersection essentially
Right.
becomes.
Liam, but to your point, when Aero Trucking comes out of that 10th Avenue loaded, or even unloaded, and takes a left turn out of there, that takes a while for that truck to get up that inclination of that ramp of that curve.
And when they do it at 7:30 in the morning, when traffic is
And the sun's in your eyes.
cooking along there.
I'm just saying, it's.
Yep.
I don't think though, Aero Truck, so they're not moving, they're not gonna be using 10th. Their location is gonna stay.
I don't believe that the trucks are going to be late, and that's not my impression from what I'm aware of. But
Because it's pasture back here.
yeah, so unless that they've
There's
got some
cows,
sort of
there's cows back there.
some sort of a loadout or something. I guess my biggest concern is that if you've got city trucks, gravel trucks, dump
You
trucks.
have a business that's going to bring their supplies in on a semi-trailer, thank you, that's in Lot 3. They aren't gonna bring that in a van, it is going to be a long semi coming in and out of there. I don't care if it's once a week, once a month. That truck, when it leaves, it can go left or right, and if it decides to go left, that is gonna take that semi time to get over.
30
That's why I'm
seconds,
just
about
saying.
30 seconds to clear the lane of travel.
I'm just saying, it's not something, and we're not used to that. That's all I'm saying. Even if the DOT would agree to a short term, that it's, I just think signage is gonna be huge there.
Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call. Brandy?
All right, Kate,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Kohane,
Yes.
Jarvis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. With that, we are on to agenda item. Resolution passes unanimously. Site 7 is open public comment. Is there anybody that wants to say anything? Madam Manager, you don't have anything to add? New business, 8. Old business, 9. Go ahead.
Let's, this
Nope.
can go under.
Too late.
We'll do new. Okay, we'll do old. All right. Board of Adjustment meeting will be held on Monday, June 12th at noon, here. So we'll also be available on Teams. And yeah, appreciate everyone being flexible on that, and we'll see you again on Monday.
Any need for executive session? No, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh, sorry.
The city council is having a work session on Monday at 4 PM, and the commercial lake zoning district will be a topic of discussion. You all are welcome to join us if you so desire.
Is that the one where I can see, I'm on the Conservation District Board, and we put something in our minutes and it passed, and I would like to bring that. Is that the time that I can do that?
Yeah, you sure can.
Okay.
So
Good.
for those out on the ether listening, 4 o'clock, you said?
Yes.
4 o'clock work session on the Commercial Lake Zoning District. Work session,
Work session.
as in no action's gonna be taken, just
Well-
a chit chat.
Well, I was at the last work session about that, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't bring anything up because it was just a work session.
This is, we haven't had a work session on Commercial Lake specifically yet. That was just sort of trying to figure out where people were at, what they wanted to discuss. And the mayor will run the meeting accordingly, but I think he'll allow.
There's likely gonna be an opportunity for people to talk, but I can't, and I'm gonna promise that on behalf of.
I don't know, I was so
No.
confused because I was there and he said, no, you can't, and now this
So
time I can.
work session, 4 o'clock, City Council
Okay.
chambers, right, manager?
No, it'll be upstairs in the public works.
Upstairs in the Public Works Hall at City Hall. So 4 o'clock, Commercial Lake District, if you want to know what's going on with the Commercial Lake District. Monday, thank you. Anything else?
Will it be televised?
Anything else? Good, we're adjourned, thank you.